Well, good morning. How's everybody doing? Hey, we're celebrating some Super Bowl stuff. We're not the Super Bowl church, but just out of curiosity, you got any Kansas City fans? Wow. We have any San Francisco fans? One. All right. Well, hey, enjoy the commercials, right? You know, it's a big day. All right. I understand. Like I said last week, the Cowboys aren't in it, so nobody cares. But anyway, before you boo me off the stage, you may not know this, and if you follow us on social media, you saw this, and if you don't, you should, because crazy cool things like this happen all the time. We had a drawing last week for people that submitted family cards because we were trying to update our database, and so we, unashamedly tried to bribe you into it by offering a prize, and we drew out two winners, and the reason I tell you this is because it has to do with our series. We gave the winner a gift card to Home Depot. We also gave them a second card to give to their neighbor, to give them a chance it's an excuse to go to their neighbor and say, hey, I got this the other day and I thought of you and I thought you might want this $50 gift card for Home Depot. Isn't that great? Give yourselves a hand for being generous. Yeah. We are right in the middle of a neighbor series, and so if you haven't been with us, I can catch you up really easily. But basically what we've known is that Jesus said the most important thing we can do is love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourselves. And so we've been trying to put that into practice, but we know some things, and some of this is just born out of my own experience and talking to some of you guys, is that for a lot of us, we don't really know our neighbors. The street we live on, or the apartment complex we're in, or the townhouse where you're at, you maybe know one or two maybe, but a lot of them you don't know, and it's really hard to love somebody you don't know. And so what we've been talking about is, how do you move from stranger to acquaintance? And then if you can get to acquaintance, how do you move from acquaintance to some kind of relationship? And so we started with a couple things. Pastor Corey did a magnificent job helping us out understand that hospitality and humility actually are a great way to start that process. And then as you show people kindness, it kind of creates a connection and it lowers people's anxiety. And then today, what we're talking about is generosity. That being generous can actually help develop a relationship. And we'll get to that in just a moment, but I think it's important. I think it's only fair to ask the question, why should I be a good neighbor? Because the truth is, especially why should I love my neighbor? Because for a lot of you, you might look at your street or where you live and think, well, I don't know anybody else that's trying to love me. I mean, I just do the same thing that they're doing, right? Why should I extend myself? Why should I make an effort when it doesn't seem like anybody else is? Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, it's just what he said. He goes, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I know you're not supposed to do this, like when they tell you about how to preach and do stuff like that. You're not supposed to get heavy right away, but there was a guy with a cheese head on up here earlier, so, kind of rules are kind of out the door today. And so for just a moment, if you are a follower of Jesus, let me talk to you for just a second. Jesus was so clear that this is what your life is about. That if you're gonna follow me, this is what your life is about. And so I know, because I've fallen victim of this too, it's so easy to let your life be about other things, right? Getting ahead at work and setting up yourselves up for retirement and all your kids' activities and all the trips and vacations and experiences you wanna have and doing all this stuff and all those other things. And so I just wanna ask you to do a little heart check this morning. If you say, I'm a follower of Jesus, can you authentically and sincerely say, and my life is about loving God with everything I have and loving my neighbors as I love myself? Because that's what he called us to. And I don't mean to be mean, and I'm not trying to be pushy, but if you can't say that, and I don't know a better way to say this, you're not doing it right. You're not really doing what he said was the most important thing to do if you're gonna follow him. The good news is, even if you get on track, he's happy to bring you back. He's excited to have you back on board. And so as followers of Jesus, why should I love my neighbor? Well, really the easy answer is because he said so, right? I mean, he's the guy I'm modeling my life after. He said so. But it's even deeper than that. It's even deeper than that. I mean, his command is enough of a reason, okay? I get that. But there's even more. He gave us even more reason. And you know this. When you came to be a follower of Jesus, the reason you did is because he loved you so well. He loved you so well, he set you up to love others well. Really, what you're doing is simply reflecting what God's done in your life to other people when you love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's really what it's about. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, that makes perfect sense. But what if you're not a follower of Jesus? Maybe you're here, you're kind of checking this out. You're like, I kind of like these people, I like this stuff, but I don't know that, I'm on board. I haven't really signed up all the way just yet. Why should I love my neighbor? I go back to when our first daughter started kindergarten. And it's wise kindergarten teacher. She knew that sometimes parents have a little bit of a hard time letting their kids go to kindergarten and walking away and being gone and all that stuff. And so she called in all the parents and all the kids on the very first day of school. And she said, I'm gonna spend the first 15 minutes with moms and dads and guardians and grandparents and whoever's here and our new kindergartners. But then after 15 minutes, you have to leave, right? You have to go. You can't go to school with your child. Right, okay, so we get there and we come in and it's like you can imagine, lots of little 5-year-olds run around, kind of manage chaos or whatever. And she says, here's the deal. Moms, dads, grandparents, grandmas, guardians, whoever's here. You want your little 5-year-old, your little brand new kindergartner to have a great experience and have great friends in kindergarten, don't you? Well, yeah, of course, yeah. And she said, now, the kids may or may not express it this way, but all the children in our classroom, they would love to have friends at kindergarten. And she said, so here's what you need to do. When you get home today, you need to talk with your child about this very simple idea that the best way to have good friends is to be a good friend. That if you will be a good friend, you will have good friends. And I know that's kindergarten and everything else, but I think the translation is really, really simple. If you want good neighbors, be a good neighbor, right? I mean, it's a lot easier to have good neighbors if you are actually a good neighbor. Whether you follow Jesus or not, this is gonna make a difference in the way you relate to the people that live right around you. And so we have good reasons, but I'll admit, I drive up and down my street. It's hard because neighbors are weird. I mean, just, they're weird, right? I mean, they do strange stuff. They do odd things. I think I've told you this before. I'm pretty sure one of my neighbors is stalking me. I watched them through the window with my binoculars, and they were Googling my name. So, and they had 2 T's. They knew me, yeah. So it's kind of odd, right? They're weird. They do things different. They think different things. They believe different things. They have a different lifestyle than I do. It's okay. It's all right. You can still be a good neighbor. As a follower of Jesus, you can still love your neighbors as you love yourself. But here's what I know about this. Just because it's a good idea, just because somebody says it, it doesn't mean I'm gonna actually do it, right? I mean, I'm hopeful that you guys are here and you're like, yeah, I wanna try this, I wanna do this, and I'm gonna make myself do a couple things. I'm gonna really try hard to put it into practice. But you know this, and again, this isn't a Jesus thing, this is a people thing. Unless your heart's in it, it doesn't last, does it? You do it a couple times and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. And then you get busy and you kind of forget about it and you go on and then it was just a good idea and something I tried a while back and that's the end of it. See, it's your heart that moves your hands. Unless your heart changes, you can't really do anything over the long haul. It's your heart that moves your hands. And so today, as we talk about generosity, I want you to kind of keep that in mind, that if you have a generous heart, you're gonna have generous hands. If you don't have a generous heart, no matter how many times you try, no matter how many things you do, ultimately, you're not gonna have generous hands. And I think that'll make more sense as we get into it this morning. So if you've got a Bible or if you like to follow along in the app, we're in Acts chapter 4. And what's going on is this is the doorstep, the front door of this Jesus movement, this thing called Christianity. This is the very beginning of this movement that's been going on for a couple thousand years and now claims 1 out of every 3 people on the planet. This was right there as it was getting started. These are the people we're about to read about. These were the people that saw it all happen. They saw Jesus do the stuff that they couldn't explain. They heard him say the things that on one level, they're like, it makes so much sense. On another level, they were going, huh? That's not the way the world works. They saw him do these signs that were just different than everybody else. And then they saw the really hard part. They saw him get arrested. They saw him executed by their government. And they were crushed. And then 3 days later, the thing that's never happened before, somebody came back from the dead. He was resurrected, and that completely changed their hearts. I mean, they were on board, they were interested, they believed a little bit, but when he came back, that was it. They realized this is a different life. This is a whole different deal. And it changed their hearts, and it led them to do some pretty incredible things with their hands. So let's read about that. Acts chapter 4, verse 32. It's just kind of a description of the way things were at the front of this movement. It says this, all the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And God's grace was so powerfully at work in them all that there were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field that he owned, and he brought the money and he put it at the apostles' feet. So this is a description, like I said, of kind of what was going on in those early days. And you see right away that there was just a spirit of generosity. But even before that, there was a great phrase in there. It says, they all had one heart and mind. And they were loving God with their heart, and they were loving their neighbors. I mean, they had heard Jesus say that probably hundreds, maybe thousands of times. That what you need to do, who you need to be, the way the world works. Everything runs through this filter. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbors yourself. They heard this over and over and over, but then they were actually doing it because what they had seen Jesus do had changed their hearts. And they became different people because of it. Their hearts were changed. It changed what they did with their hands. And as you read about it, you see they met each other's needs. But it wasn't because, and this is so key to me, it wasn't because they were trying to be nice. It wasn't because they're like, you know what, we should be good neighbors. We want good neighbors. It's nice to be, neighborly and, all this kind of stuff. They had been changed. And it was God's grace that changed them. God's grace was such a trigger in their lives, they could not stand for someone among them to be in need. I mean, they were compelled. It wasn't a we should, and it's good to take care of others, and we need to. It was a compelling thing that God has loved me so well. God has done so much for me. My heart and my life have been changed so dramatically that if somebody around me is in need, I have to do something about it. Not I want to, not I should. I have to. Whether it's an emotional need, a physical need, or spiritual need, I have to. And as you read about it, I mean, the visible stuff is pretty easy, right? It makes sense. Like they're selling stuff, they're helping each other. And you guys get this, you know this. You bump into somebody that needs some food to eat or needs some clothes to wear or needs some help with rent. You're like, well, yeah, I can try to help out with that. I'll help you. The physical stuff is obvious. But there was also a level of which they helped each other emotionally, which I know sounds a little bit crazy, but think about it this way. When you live in a society that tells you you're not worth anything unless you have money or a certain kind of citizenship, and you run into this group that says, we love you, we value you, you belong with us, we want to help you, you're important to us, we are for you, we are on your side, and we want you here with us. That starts to meet emotional needs that really can't get met in many other ways. And it really actually becomes a pull to people that look at the way they treat people. I like that. I like that I like being treated that way, and I like that they treat other people that way. They met not just physical needs, but emotional needs, and then they met spiritual needs. I mean, it says that they were constantly being witnesses of what God had done in their life. And sometimes, especially if you've been in church around a long time, you hear that word and it kind of creates all kinds of thoughts and memories and expressions. But keep it simple, right? What is a witness? It's somebody that saw something and then tells what they saw. That's all they were doing. They saw something. They saw Jesus do something and it changed them. And they simply told that story. It wasn't a formulaic thing. It wasn't a memorized spiel. It wasn't anything like that. God had changed their life. And they simply told people that God can change your life too. And you think, well, wait a minute. I thought we were talking about loving our neighbors and meeting needs and all this other stuff. Many of you know this. There's no greater need that anybody has than to be reconciled back to God. That's the greatest need that every person has. And so if I care about you, I care about the visible, physical things, the needs that you have. I care about the emotions and what's going on inside you. And I also care deeply about you being reconciled back to God, because that is one of the best things that can happen to you. And they did. They cared about these things. They loved each other this way. And what's so cool to me about it was this was their lifestyle, and it was powered by their new life. Right? This wasn't a thing they put on. This wasn't a good idea. Like I said, this wasn't because somebody said we should. This is just how they lived. But it's easy to look at that, right? And really any character in the Bible. It's easy to look at that and think, they're kind of like superheroes or something. I mean, they were the really, saints and then kind of the heroes or whatever. But life's different. Things are hard. And here's my guess. And we don't know this because we don't know everybody's story that was part of this early church. We know a few, but we don't know all of them. My guess is they were just like a lot of us before we met Jesus and a lot of people that haven't yet met Jesus. And what I mean by that is, when they looked at their life, most of the time, most people look at it with a closed hand. And let me explain what that means. It's not just that I'm not being generous. It's just that I'm trying to hold on. I'm trying to get a grasp. I'm trying to keep what I have. And so it plays out in a lot of ways, but let me give you a couple examples. One example is very easy, is with money, and we get that. Generosity and money go together. But they would run across a need. They would see something before they met Jesus, and their response was, maybe I'll throw them a token, maybe I'll give them a couple of bucks, maybe I'll give them enough so that I don't feel guilty, so that I can move on, or actually I may not give them anything, but the reality is I am holding on to what's mine because I worked hard for this, and I don't know if I'm gonna get any more, and I don't know what the future holds, so I am holding on to my money. That's a closed-handed approach. Maybe take it out of that context. Maybe take it into that, we talked about emotional things. Take it into that context. When they would run into a friend or a family member or somebody close by, or maybe it was a neighbor, who was really struggling, really having a hard time, their response might be something like this if it was closed-handed. I feel bad for you, and I'm sorry, and I hope you do better. I hope things get better, but I got my own stuff. Right? I'm working on me right now. I'm trying to get kind of on top. I've got my own struggles, and I got to get me right before I can actually help anybody else. I kind of got a closed hand because, I got to take care of me. I really can't stop and take care of you too. Or maybe when it comes to time, a closed-handed approach. They've got an opportunity to build a relationship with someone. They've got an opportunity to connect with someone. That closed-handed approach says, man, I'm busy. You don't know, my job, I work a lot of hours, and I got kids and they're doing 150 different things. I don't even know where they're supposed to be tonight. I just know I got to take them. I'm busy. And when I finally get a few minutes, come on, that's me time. I need to watch the game. I tape some stuff I want to watch. I got some things I want to do. I want to chill out. I don't have time for that. That's what their hearts were like before they met Jesus. But all of a sudden, their hearts change. They meet Jesus and their heart changes. And instead of that closed-handed approach, all of a sudden they have an open-handed approach. This is, you need something? Let me see if I can help. You're struggling? Let me sit with you for a while. You need me? I'll make some time for you. And you see the difference. And then they'd gone from a closed-handed approach that I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the emotional capacity, to an open-handed approach that says, I love you and I value you. I will make the time, I will find the money, and I will invest in our relationship because I care about you. Huge, huge difference. And here's what happens. And you know this, because you're the same way they are. You're just like them and you're just like their neighbors. When somebody lives with an open hand like that, it gives incredible credibility to whatever they have to say, doesn't it? You treat me different than everybody else. Everybody else has a closed hand, you have an open hand. Everybody else is holding on to what they can have and keep and get, and you're just constantly giving away your time, your energy, your capacity, your funds, whatever it is. You just want to share, you just want to love, and you are different. And I really want to know why. I want to know how somebody could live that way instead of how everybody else seems to be living. There was so much credibility behind what they said. It worked like a magnet. It just drew people in. And think about your own experience. You know people that are closed-fisted and you know people that are open-handed. Who do you want to hang out with? Who do you want to spend your time with? And maybe the most heavy part of all of this is, if you come with a closed hand, no matter how good the news is you have to share, it falls flat. It falls flat. There's nothing behind it. If you come with an open hand, the good news that you have to share, like I said, becomes a magnet that draws people in. If you're like that, I want to know why. And it says that they continually acted as witnesses of what Jesus had done, how their life had changed. And if you look in the very next chapter says, more and more men and women were believing in Christ and continually, like this was happening over and over and over, being added to their number. Like I said, it's a magnet that pulls people in. And here's what I know. Their neighbors in that day, in that time, in that world, just like your neighbors. They are. They're the exact same thing. They want the same things. As a matter of fact, you want the same things as your neighbors do. Now, I know they're weird, and I know they got different stuff, and they, funny smells come out of their house and all that other stuff. I get all that. But the truth is, we want to be healthy. We want our family to do well. We want to see our kids have a great future. I mean, all the things that every normal person wants, that's the same things they wanted. It's the same things that you want. And just like their neighbors responded to that open-handed generosity, your neighbors will respond the same way. And what's crazy about it is it really runs the gamut, because I gotta be honest with you, as a pastor, I read that and I'm like, so I gotta sell all my stuff and give it to you people, or give it to my neighbors? Is that what I'm supposed to do? And the answer is it depends. The answer is it depends. Because if I have an open hand, it changes the way I see the world. It changes the way I interact with people. You see, before it was about keeping it closed and keeping my stuff. But now I have an open hand with my time, with my money, with my energy, with my emotions, because I see them as tools that help me love God and love other people. So why would I keep them clenched when I can release them and live a life of freedom? And like I said, it runs the gamut. It can be as simple as a tank of gas to completely changing your family. So I want to tell you 3 stories real quick. 3 stories about generosity and how they made an impact. The first one happened a couple of years ago in a small Midwestern town, and the guy's name was Mukhtar Raja. Mukhtar Raja owned a little gas station, a service station, in the middle of this small town. He was right off the main street. But unfortunately, in this town, they had some kind of serious water problem, and they had to dig up the whole main street and replace all the plumbing and drainage lines and all this other stuff with the city and all this stuff. And long story short, what happened was there was no way to drive into his service station anymore. You literally had to go around a couple of blocks, circle around the back, and come in the back way to get to this gas station. Well, as you can imagine, nobody's going to do that. And so after several months, he was losing money and getting desperate. And he would continually call the city, and when are you going to be done? When are you going to be done? And they said, we don't know. We're going as fast as we can. He'd gotten to the point where he had lost over $100,000, and he was really scrambling. And he had pretty much decided, I need to give up. I'm going to have to declare bankruptcy. It's not going to work. The world changed on me, and I don't have any way to adjust. And then one Sunday, about lunchtime, a few cars came in, which he thought was odd, because usually, at least at his service station, people came in the morning before they went to work, or they came in the evening after work while they're out running errands. He rarely got people during the day, especially on a weekend. But a few people start showing up. And he's happy for that. He's excited about that. And then that was the best Sunday he'd had in a long, long time. And then over the course of the next week, people kept trickling in. People he had never seen before, which he thought was odd. And then the following Sunday, he's got, for him anyway, like a traffic jam. And he's like, what is going on? And so he comes up to one of the cars and he asks, he goes, excuse me, can I ask you, why are you here? What is it that brought you here? I don't ever remember seeing you here before, and I know it's not easy to get in. And he said the guy kind of half smiled and looked down a little bit, and he goes, well, I go to that church over there. He pointed across the street and a little ways down. He goes, yeah. He goes, our pastor said that we need to be paying attention to people in our community, and that sometimes the needs that people have are right in front of us. And he knew that nobody was coming to your gas station anymore. So he asked everybody in our church if you would at least go buy 1 gallon or one tank of gas at the gas station. And when you read his response, Mukhtar's response to this, he said he's from Pakistan, his wife's from Ukraine. He said a couple things just blew my mind. From people just buying gas at his gas station, he said, you know what, we're not from here and we don't have any family here, but it feels like we have family now. Things just feel different. He goes, nobody asked about my race. Nobody asked about my religion. Nobody said that they weren't coming back. They just said, and get this, we're for you. And he said, and it was incredible. It changed the way I saw the people around me. And to know that people in my community are for me has changed the way I see the people I live by. So as small as a tank of gas completely changes this neighbor's impact. But sometimes it's much bigger than that. Sometimes it's actually life-changing. I want to read you a letter. We were fortunate to get this story. Some of you know Kevin and Samantha Graham. They go to our church. They're in the first service. And I know, first of all, what I'm going to share with you, I know we have a lot of families, which I praise God for, that are involved in the foster care system, that are adopting, that are opening their home and bringing kids in. But this is the latest story that I know of. And she said this. She wrote it down for me. She said, our family ministry is foster care. We had talked about fostering and adopting before we got married. When we learned how many children were in need of a home, we decided that we would open our home and try to help fill this need. We took in 2 children 6 years ago and eventually had the opportunity to adopt them both. I mean, can you think about what's more being a neighbor than, hey, you not only do you have a place for us, you come, you be part of our family. We're going to take care of you. We're going to watch you grow up. We're going to invest in you. We are going to be good neighbors. Last spring, we learned about another need that had us return to fostering. To be honest, it was not a convenient time for us. It would have been so easy just to look the other way, but we prayerfully considered it over and over again, and we got confirmation that this was something we were meant to do. Once again, we knew we could fill the need and use our resources to help, and we were placed with a 4th child. Since making the decision to step out in faith, God has been faithful. From free formula to continual confirmation that this is where we're supposed to be, God has made sure that we can continue. Of course, our life has changed. There are a lot of reasons we do this, but the most important thing is what God has done for us. Not only do we firmly believe that we've been called personally to this ministry, but we think it is the best way to use the resources God has given us. We're all adjusting. It has not been easy, but we're teaching our kids about how to love and accept their neighbors. I think, what an amazing story. And that doesn't mean that that's what God's call is on your life, but I just want you to see the difference. An open hand could be as small as a tank of gas. It could be as big as bringing somebody into your family. And I told you I was going to tell you 3 stories. I wish all the stories were positive. The last story happened to me. I have a neighbor, my immediate neighbor, lives right next to me. And this happened about 3 years ago. He came over and he asked me if I could help him with something. And I was like, well, sure, I'll be happy to try. He said, I know you like to do woodworking. I see you out in your garage doing stuff. He said, my wife owns a nail salon and she needs, I don't know what they're called, but she needs to build like these stations where people sit at and the nail techs do people's nails and stuff. And we need to rebuild the ones in her salon. We need new ones. He said, I'll pay for the materials. I'll pay you for doing it. Would you be able to help me? And I got to be honest, my first thought was, I was kind of thinking, first of all, I'm like, man, this is a little above my level. I've never built anything like that. I don't exactly know even what he's talking about. And you know, he's like, well, he drew it on a napkin. And I'm like, I might need a little more than that. You know, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know that I could do a good job that I would feel good about saying, I'll take your money for this. And so I was a little concerned about that. I was also a little concerned because I was in a really pretty busy time, right? I mean, I had 2 kids in school at the time. My wife's working, I'm working. We're trying to live life and do stuff. We got our family, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, we're in a season of life where there's a lot going on. But the truth is, 100%, I didn't want to. I just didn't want to. I don't know why, but I just had anything in me that was saying, you should help him. And so as politely as I could, I said, no, I can't. And it has cost me with him. It's cost me. I can tell. The few times I interact with him, it's always very short. It's one-word answers. It's a quick wave and he keeps going. And I don't know if that's the thing or not, but it really feels like it is. And I so wish, I'm not saying I should have taken the job and done a bad job or anything else. I so wish, though, that I had figured out a way to have more of an open hand with him, because I think I would have a completely different relationship with him now if I had. But I said, no, I can't. And I've got to rebuild and repair that because I wasn't willing to be generous. And so generosity makes such a big difference. And I want to ask you to do something. And I know this is a little bit awkward. This is a little bit weird. The first part's easy. The second part's a little awkward. But you're going to drive home. Maybe today you're going to go to lunch or go to the Super Bowl parties or whatever you're going to do. But eventually you're going to drive home. And you're going to get on your street or you're going to drive into your complex or wherever your situation is. And you're going to be getting close to home. And I want to ask you to do something. I want to ask you to just take a moment and think about your hands. When it comes to your neighbors, the people that live around you, do you typically have a closed hand or do you have an open hand? Which is it? Just, and you know, no guilt, no judgment, none of that, but just ask you to kind of think through, what is my heart towards my neighbors? Am I closed-handed and closed-fisted, or am I open-handed? Which is the best description of me? And here's where this could be a little awkward, and if you're driving, keep one hand on the wheel, okay? But what if you just drove down your street with your hand open? Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, just as you go down your street, and I'm not saying do this forever, I'm just saying do this for the next week, the next 7 days, when you turn on your street and you start driving in your complex or whatever, just what if you drove through with your hand open? I wanna have an open hand when it comes to my neighbors. Now, if you are a follower of Jesus, I'm gonna ask you to take it just a little bit further. To not only ask yourself, what do my hands look like? And to not only open up your hand, but let that open hand be a prayer. It says, God, would you make my heart more generous towards my neighbors? That I would love my neighbors as I love myself. And then God, would you allow me the opportunity to connect with one of my neighbors this week? To show them humility, hospitality, kindness, generosity, something. Father, would you put me in a place, would you help me be intentional about connecting with one of my neighbors? Now, if you've got one of the 4x4 cards, you already know who. You've got that list you're working on. Who are the 4 people around me that I can invest in, that I can be for? But God, would you help me connect and invest in one of my neighbors? Now, I'll be honest with you. It's gonna cost you something. It is. It's just gonna cost you something. It might cost you money. I mean, you may find out of a need or something you could do to help them and bless them, and it may actually cost you some money. And if it does, you should try to meet that need. And if it's bigger than you can meet, you should come and talk to your small group and come talk to your church, because as a church, we want to be good neighbors and we want to help. But the reality is, for most of you, what it's going to cost is time, right? It's going to cost time to talk to them, find out what's going on, find out how you can help, find out where you can plug into their life. It's going to cost you time. And so you may be late to soccer practice, right? You may not be able to stream the rest of season 5 tonight. You might not be able to finish that project, that thing you've been looking at, that me time thing that you're gonna do. It may cost you that. But let me ask you a question. If your neighbor walks away thinking they are for me because of your open-handed generosity, isn't it worth it? Isn't it worth it that they see you and they see the way you are being generous with them and it gets their attention? Isn't that worth it to be late, to miss the show, to not have as much time on the project? I think it is. I think that's exactly what Jesus meant when he said, love your neighbors as you love yourself. Let's pray together.